the grid plan. To 1960.
streets are calendars containing who we were and who we will be next.
It is one of the most exciting and familiar urban settings in the world, the city of New York. 5 boroughs, 327 square miles, 8.5 million people, and counting. Perhaps because it is so familiar, it is easy to take for granted, to assume it somehow just came into being. But what did it take for this amazing landscape to arise? How did it begin? Why did it grow so large? To a surprising degree, the answer may be found beneath your feet, on the streets you walk every day. They are the very same streets, after all, which generations of earlier New Yorkers, men, women, and children, walked around as they moved through the cities they knew. Cities filled with Model T Fords and elevated trains, electric streetcars, and horse-drawn trolleys. Join us as we embark on a journey through time, peeling back the layers of history to uncover the cities that lie beneath the one we know. Over the next 28 minutes, we will bring those earlier cities back to life and see some of the ways New York has grown and changed through a series of unfolding glimpses. Not landscapes, but timescapes that will take us back, step by step, all the way into the city's past. Back to a time before it was a city at all. It began with the rolling lands around the harbor, home for thousands of years to a native people called the Lenape, who lived off the fish and oysters that filled its rivers. The names they gave to their settlements and to the long, slender island at the head of the bay would remain in use long after they themselves had vanished or been displaced.
This island is the key and principal stronghold of the country.
The same land and water would have very different meaning for the newcomers now arriving from across the sea. In early September 1609, Henry Hudson, an English explorer working for the Dutch, sailed into a well-protected bay just off the Atlantic, pushed north into a narrow passage, and was amazed to come upon a second bay, whose calm, sparkling waters were perfectly sheltered from the open sea, just a few miles away. It was perhaps the greatest natural harbor in the world, as well as the gateway to a majestic river, later named for Hudson himself, reaching hundreds of miles into the continent, the main entrance to North America. It was on that same slender island between two rivers that Hudson's employers, the Dutch, chose to plant their headquarters in the New World. Carrying out the most famous real estate deal in history, they purchased Manhattan from the natives for the value of 60 guilders, the legendary $24, then built a bustling port city called New Amsterdam, complete with a fort and gun battery, a canal to transport freight, and a wooden dock to handle the growing trade in furs, rum, and sugar, as well as human beings wrested from Africa. Surrounded on 3 sides by water, and on the 4th by a high wall to protect from attack, the dense, compact colony provided a prophetic template for the modern city, closely packed buildings facing busy streets. Eager to expand their foothold, the Dutch planted settlements all around the harbor, including the village of Breukelen across the river, the suburb of Haarlem to the north, and on the lands beyond that, the estate of Jonas Bronk and his family, the Bronks. But within 40 years, the Dutch were gone, pushed out by the English, who by then had settled the rest of the American coastline. In August 1664, without firing a shot, the British took over New Amsterdam and gave it a new name, New York, in honor of the king's younger brother, the Duke of York. Over the coming century, the English would expand the network of settlements first laid down by the Dutch, but like the Dutch before them, the English presence was about to recede into history, this time due to the colonists themselves. With the coming of the American Revolution, the entire region would be invaded and occupied, and the city itself all but destroyed in 2 devastating fires. And when the war was finally over, New York would have to begin again.
This still new city is the queen
One of the first cities of modern birth, but also a city of a new type. Very diversities of race and religion are creating here a city which men have not seen before, a city which has the light of prophecy.
Now the second largest city in the world after London, New York plunged into the 20th century with a new and distinctively modern sense of dynamism and movement. Downtown, the city began its thrilling race into the sky, propelled by the new white-collar economy taking shape on Wall Street and taking advantage of a revolutionary new kind of construction, using steel framing and elevators that allowed its towers to rise higher than any buildings in history. Every few years, a new skyscraper claimed the title of tallest in the world, corporate symbols on the world's first skyline, the iconic image of the modern city. But nothing about that city was more dynamic or modern than the millions of people now pouring in through the harbor, following an epic journey that took them across an ocean, past the Statue of Liberty, through the harsh inspections of Ellis Island, and into the busy streets of Manhattan, where they found refuge in the complex ethnic patchwork of the Lower East Side, a bustling human cauldron of nearly 1 million people from more than a dozen countries in Europe and elsewhere. Here the newcomers would remain for just 10 years on average, before upending their lives once again and moving on to newer parts of the city. By now, that outward movement was being advanced by a series of gigantic steel bridges across the East River, and by an entirely new kind of transit system, an underground electric railroad called the subway. Over the next few decades, dozens of new subway lines would be pushed beneath the rivers and out into the countryside, welding the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan into a single metropolitan unit. For the price of a nickel subway ride, all the far-flung wonders of the metropolis now came within reach. Beaches and resorts at the far edge of Brooklyn, remote woodlands and ballparks in the northern Bronx, vaudeville theaters and roof gardens on Times Square. By World War I, this 5-borough universe had itself been linked to the rest of the country through a pair of spectacular structures, Grand Central Terminal and Pennsylvania Station, majestic gateways through which a new generation would soon be arriving to propel the city fully into the modern age.